Really pleased that the person that I'm chatting to this morning, the last time I saw them was at the Slapstick Festival 5 years ago, and he's one of a proper, what I think of as a prankster comedian. That it's so much of just the joy of creating mayhem and confusion, and it doesn't have to be on stage. It's not like when he walks off stage you think, oh well, now he's stopped playing that part. I've seen him wander around kind of bars and just wrap people in parcel tape, and just I love that kind of just the desire to create mayhem. And it is Bernie Clifton. Good morning, Bernie.
A clue. The parcel tape. Good morning to you, Robin. Can I first of all say, I am not worthy. I am conversating with a mastermind winner.
Oh, it was. Have you ever done it, Bernie? It's the scariest thing I've ever done in show business.
No, I love the way though that you described to John Humphreys what happened to your brain and your hearing when you got one wrong.
Well, his questions are so long, you forget them by the time they get to the end. So what is it? I don't know. I can't remember how it began. It was about 3 minutes ago you started asking me about chalk.
That's the one thing that annoys me about the programme is the length of the questions. Just ask a short question and let the participant flounder for a bit longer. Instead of the but on the day in question, did the foreman do the thing or did he actually? And on the moment, and you're thinking, finish the bloody question, man. However, congratulations.
Thank you. I like the way you did that. It was almost like Danny Kaye going, so with the vessel in the pestle and the mortar in the... I don't know which one the poison's in, John. I really don't.
Can I just take you back on you just mentioned the offstage pranks, which has been actually the mainstay of my life. It's kept me relatively sane. And to take us back to the Edinburgh Fringe that you and I did together, and the parcel tape at what can I call it? A moment or a saga? I actually did it in the grounds of is it the Pleasance?
Yeah, Pleasance Courtyard Bar, wasn't it? Yeah.
And for the uninitiated, I would put a shoulder bag over my shoulder. And tied to the strap of it would be a roll of like, it's worth about 50 yards worth of that brown sticky parcel tape. And I'd tie one end to the lamppost and then I'd walk around through the assembled throng, inadvertently parceling people up and taping people up. And in the middle of all this mayhem, and there was yourself and there was a few, Ross Noble, I think, was there, a few other people. In the middle of all this, I was stopped by an American and he said, "Excuse me, is this performance?" You can call it what you like, mate, but it's what I do on a daily basis. So it has helped me to put the ridiculous business that I'm in, Robin, in some form of context. Keep the lunacy on stage, but make sure it filters off stage as well.
See, that's what I love, because, I mean, obviously we all know there are comedians where the difference between them on stage and off is huge. That they can go into showbiz mode the moment that the lights are on, but the moment they walk off, any member of the public would probably go, oh, they're very different, and they might be. But I love that thing which says, you know, as long as you're out and you're in daylight, there's some fun to be had. There's the joy of creating comedy or confusion or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think as well. I think I keep going back to this. It justifies the ridiculous lifestyle, doing 2,000 miles a week and do in the length and breadth of the country with all the props in the. And by the way, you haven't asked me about the prop yet, but later. But with all the props in the back of the van and. Apart from an ostrich and a giant 15-foot shark, and I always and I was looking at it the other night, actually invaded Ken Dodd's "This Is Your Life" back in the day when Frank Carson said, "We'd like to introduce our next," poor Michael Aspel. I just watched him retreating. And Frank Carson said, it's an older pal of yours. He just finished the tour on The Sound of Music, Bernie Clifton." And I came on riding on the back of a nun, apparently. And I remember Ken just looked at me and said, "You can't do that." But of course I did. And we were driving up to do up to Ayr from Skegness, which is just round the corner. One afternoon with Roger the roadie driving, and we overtook a little Fiat 132 car with 4 nuns in it. Battling. So I dived amongst the props and I got the nun and I stuck it out the window. The driver, these 4 nuns in this car, I think they pulled over. I'm not sure if they ever completed their journey. It's not what you expect to see on the A74 is a nun waving at you from the back window of a car. So, but it does make it clear, Robin, doesn't it, that this the overlap, if you like, that I keep talking about, and comedians have got every right to be, miserable. I mean, Tony Hancock was a classic case, and Peter Sellers. They had problems with their private life, didn't they? The two balancing the scales, if you like.
See, I think it's an interesting thing because in my head it's a bit like Lemmy from Motorhead. I was talking with someone who used to work with him in Hawkwind, and he remained this garrulous individual as long as the audience were there. He'd go drinking with them, he'd do all those things. Then once he went behind the door, that's where there might be another world and another human being. And I have to admit, that's what I really like, is I love that bit, that as long as there's an audience there, whatever that audience is, I don't mean a paying audience, I mean that thing where that communicate with them. And I was thinking that you are someone that, though you've done a lot of TV stuff and the Lulu Show and Crackerjack and all of those things, it does seem to me that live is the most important thing for you, that bit of being in a room and the people are there and that event is happening here and now,
which is what's very troubling about the present situation, in terms of I think that I am actually defined, I think, by the ability to express myself and the nonsense and the ridiculous props and to go into that area and incidentally get paid for it, but to know that it was there as part of my life. And for the last well over a year, it's gone, it's out there. And although I've been asked to do stuff by Zoom, to do some form of my act, I can't hack it. You just need that bounce back, that live audience to be aware that at any moment now they could be taken to another place, which is, and the props, I use the expression regularly, the props in every sense of the word, because there's something to lean on. And it all started for me, Robin, when I was brought up in St Helens, and we're not far from Liverpool, but we ain't Scousers. I think we'd got that sort of overlap of Scouse humour, but there was also a very high percentage of Irishness about St Helens as a town, and probably still is. So what you had the sort of the Scouse attack on life on a daily basis, and then of course you had the Irish, anything for the crack. And between the load of us, I always remember we grew up in Charles Street, rows and rows of 59 Charles Street of terraced houses. And my mum always fancied a semi-detached house, and she did actually get her wish come true. What was the developer's name? Adolf Hitler. That's right. And we were bombed. It missed us by 3 doors. But I think there was something in that those generations that got them through the war, and sort of tidaled over into my generation, into the 50s. Growing up, we did stuff as a group of lads, and I was on a building site working with the, as I just said, Scousers and Irish people, and there was this level of humour that unfortunately there tends always to be a victim, doesn't there? If you think of slapstick comedy and going back to the greats, there always tends to be someone, if a practical joke is being played or a jape. I mean, if you were walking down the street on a building site and you saw a small cardboard box in the middle of the road, you would be bound to think, oh, I'll just give that a good kick. But if you did kick it and then discover there was a brick in it, and that's what I mean. It was going on a regular basis. That there was that bit of lunacy and anarchy. And unfortunately, as the A&E department of St Helens Hospital would bear out, there were victims, and it was very physical, Robin, as well. The whole my whole upbringing was of comedy in a physical nature. So maybe it's only natural that I've ended up where I am with a multitude of props.
But that's interesting, because what I think, talking about the victim, and I think there's some comedy which is very kind of sharp and really does require, you know, punching, you know, down at people. And yet when I watch your stuff, I think it is kind of, it's because it's in such a beautiful world of silliness. You know, it's like when I watch someone like Tim Vine, who also has some lovely props as well, and some beautiful, you know, that thing where the enormity of the props sometimes for quite a small pun, of course, makes it even more magnificent. And that's what I think. Watching you, I think it's about joy, and that seems to be, you know, that's what you want to bring. Just let's celebrate. This is life, and here's something just totally silly to immerse yourself in.
And I wonder, and I always relate, because I think generally we're all quite proud and still part of where we grew up. In the early 50s, Sunday cinema was banned by the Lord's Observance Society. There was no entertainment on Sundays. And suddenly the law was repealed, and there was entertainment available, all the cinemas in all over the country. And the films were very bad. They were that sort of the old early Technicolor Hollywood movies that never made it. And of course, the British black and whites were very, very bad. And we decided as a group of lads growing up in St Helens as teenagers that we would pick one particular cinema on one particular Sunday, and we would invade it. We'd be in the audience, and we'd be 15, 20, 30 strong, not necessarily sitting together. And I don't know how this started, but as the cinema clock got around to 10 p.m., someone would shout, 10 o'clock rally, and we would count from wherever we were sitting. We would count down from 10 to 0. And at that moment, this cacophony of sound would erupt. Didn't matter what was on the screen. And we would have concealed on our person mouth organs and bicycle bells and motor horns and comb and paper, any small device that would make a noise. And the whole cinema would erupt, you know, at the nonsense and the insanity of, not that we were ruining much entertainment. And then during the week, people would come up to us and say, where will you be this Sunday? Will it be the Rivoli or the Savoy or the Hippodrome? Which one are you going to be at? And I tried to do some research a few years ago to find out whether this was replicated in other northern towns. And I couldn't find any examples of this particular moment. And I just wonder how much of that, my upbringing and the geography and where I grew up, again, going back to Liverpool and the Irishness, how much of that is in my genes, Robin?
It is a beautiful sense of anarchy. We better have a look at the first clip as well, so we don't run over as much as I did last night. Let's have a look. This is from a TV show you've done many times, and of course live versions as well of the good old days. Let's have a look at this clip, and then we'll talk after it. So here is Bernie and Oswald and the good old days.
What are you laughing at? You've got his favourite food on your hat. Well, that's got. He's got to do his war dance now. Whoa! Steady. Hardly worth the trouble. Now, come. What's that? Do you know what that is? That's your recall to barracks. Oswald, you're going to be a hero. Come back, Leo. Get your head out of there. Get your head out. Get out, get out. Steady, steady. I do apologise about this. Come on, Oswald. Ah, yes, offer him a grape. See that all. Excuse me. Steady. Have you found his beak yet? You see some funny sights in your job, don't you? That's it! It's food! It's a cookhouse for him! Come on, Oswald, back to the cookhouse! Whoa, look out, General! General, hang on! Whoa! I hear the bugle calling. Goodbye, darling.
Interesting. Wow, that's amazing. When I think, Robin, that I mean, that was at the best, surely the best ever venue that any artist could work, the City Varieties in Leeds. And the good old days, that would be probably late 70s, maybe even early 80s. But it was at that very venue that my future was kind of decided by none other than Les Dawson. Because in October 1971, I did my very first TV show from the good old days. And at the time, I wasn't really, I mean, I loved working with props live, but at the time I'd never, I was just doing a bit of singing and a few one-liners. And it was about the same time that the Comedians TV show had just hit the nation. And at the end, I did okay, but at the end of it, Les Dawson, who was topping the bill, cornered me. And he said, you were all right, he said, but you're just doing the same as everybody else. He said, why don't you kind of, and I'll never forget the phrase, he said, why don't you go out and plough your own furrow? Les being as verbose as he could be. And he said, what do you really like doing? I said, well, I just love, props. I love mucking about visually. He said, well, why don't you go out and become a prop comic? He said, because there's no one else. They can't be bothered to do it. Oh, why don't you go out? And I was inspired, Robin, to actually do that. And I went away that night, and Les was just beginning to peak, the peak of his career, and to be for him to take the trouble to make a suggestion and put me in a certain direction kind of inspired me. The next day, I was in Chesterfield. The Monday morning, I was in Chesterfield, and the Oxfam charity had taken over a shop, and in the window of the shop was a full-size hearthrug lion skin, full size. And I went in and I said, how much is that? They went, everything's 10 bob. It's 50p. So I bought it, took it out with me, went to my car, got the towing chain around his neck, and I went around Chesterfield dragging this lion skin, took it home in the back of my car, and next door. So I was starting this collection of props. And it's so interesting that you've shown the City Varieties and the fact that that particular evening, and it was Les Dawson that sort of put me on my way. And in the years that followed, we became close friends. And he always used to wink and say, I put you right there, didn't he? As one prop followed another. So I'm very grateful to Les, and thank you for the opportunity of showing the City Varieties. Have you ever performed there?
Yeah, a few times. I had the one, I did it the penultimate night before, you remember they shut down for a couple of years?
Yeah.
And of course, the last night was Ken Dodd. And all the technicians before my show went, oh my God, we don't know how long tomorrow's going to be. Because, of course, they knew that Ken, already known for doing his 5-hour shows, knowing it might be the last time he was going to play City Varieties, they presumed they'd be there till dawn. So I just remember this sense of kind of palpable existential anxiety from the technicians, thinking it was going to be a long night with Ken the next night, even by Ken's standards.
Oh, I know. It was, I took my kids well, they'd be in their 30s, I should think. and I booked a whole row at the City Varieties to watch him. And I said, this is an opportunity. I just want you to see him when he's at his peak. And I watched him, and he came on and did 45 minutes to open the show, tapped the mic and said, I only came on to test the microphone. And I watched him as he got stronger, the audience got weaker and weaker, and he got stronger. And eventually he got them back again. And I was looking at people in the audience, and they were actually laying back in their seats. They couldn't laugh anymore. And he got this wonderful quality of taking an audience with him, with the nonsense. And I'm so glad I made that trip. It was almost like a pilgrimage, Robin, to see the master. And as you said, he had got no inkling of time. It just didn't matter. He said, after about 2.5 hours, he said, just imagine all over Leeds, people, babysitters are at the front door looking at the watches saying, where are they? And nobody ever got mugged going back from a Ken Dodd concert because it was always daylight. He was well aware. And again, living down the road from me in St Helens, in Knotty Ash, it was fantastic.
I was going to ask it because it was something I was talking about with Stuart Lee last night, which is what you were saying before about that first time where you were kind of just doing gags and songs. There is an interesting thing for a lot of comedians, I think, where you might realise that you've been playing the part of a comedian. And then, if you're lucky, you suddenly realise, it certainly happened for Stuart, to an extent it's happened to me, you kind of go, I'm playing the part of a comedian, I love comedy, but I'm not doing the thing that's in my head. And I wonder about that feeling, that first time that you went on and you started doing the prop stuff, which is a much bigger risk as well, because it's one thing for a gag to go wrong, but if you've got, an inflatable diver, and we will get to that, then it's like going the first time you do it, before you know whether it's funny, you think, well, I'm wearing an ostrich. I hope this works. I mean, how did that feel when it did click, when you thought, this is what people
it was long before then, and it was Eric Morecambe that said that he reckoned that all comedy was based on fear and fear of failure. And as a boy singer growing up in St Helens, and that's what I was. I was a singer, and with a good singing voice. And as a plumber working for the corporation in St Helens, working in bathrooms, I got perfect conditions and the acoustics to enhance my vocals. So, but I then realized that when I got up to sing in the pubs and the clubs and started to sing, I was rigid with fear. And my first job was I got a job singing with a dance band. And I was so grateful for the fact that the only way that you could hold the microphone up to your mouth on the stand was to hold the stand, because I didn't know what to do with my hands, and I was kind of paralyzed, and yet inside of me there was this bubble of comedy, as I've described earlier, living where I lived, surrounded by people with a similar sense of humor. I did want to expand it. So but I was still a singer, and as the years went by, my confidence grew. I found out that I would be able to pick up things from my surroundings. There would invariably be a piano and a piano stool, and I would lift up the lid of the piano stool, and there'd be these sort of 100-year-old pieces of music that I could discover and just make fun of. Or I used to flip the piano stool open and say, anyone for snuff? It was like as if I was opening a snuff box. And then I really got into the visuality, which has resulted in several back operations and 50, 60 years now. But wherever I went, I started to think physically. And I remembered if you did well in a club, they'd ask you to draw the raffle at the end of the night. And I was at the Ilkeston Town Supporters Club, and they said, will you draw a raffle, lad? And the tickets were in 2 big biscuit tins of, I can't quite see one, I've got a couple there, like about a foot square. And I drew the tickets out, they put them back on the stage, and I jumped in the tins and started to do a fandango around the stage. I thought, that's handy. So I went down to the local supermarket the following day. I've got any tins round the back, lad? And they got hundreds of these, what now probably worth £100 each, these beautifully embossed and artistically designed biscuit tins. So wherever I went, I'd stop off at the supermarket, put a pair of tins in the boot, and maybe leave them at the gig. So I was now dancing in a pair of biscuit tins. So, and then I suddenly looked at a mic stand, the old mic stand on a 3-footed plinth, and I pulled it off, and the rivet had gone. And I thought, what can I do? So I went out and bought a load of marbles, and I inverted the mic stand, and I filled the tube full of marbles and put it back in place, and went out, did my opening song. They picked the mic stand up as singers do to bring it forward, and this sort of dozens and dozens of marbles would cascade down the stage. So I was into props, albeit at that time in a minimal sense, but I was on my way. And then, of course, I met Les Dawson, and it really visually took off.
See, that's interesting. Talking about those biscuit tins, it reminds me of when you did that TV documentary series, The Entertainers, which Louis Theroux produced. And there was something which I thought was very interesting watching you on that. I think Bobby Davro was on it, Nicholas Parsons. I can't remember who else. But I don't know what they'd said, but I think some of the people thought this was a very straight down the line celebration of the greatest entertainers, when in fact it was a little bit ironic, and it had a little bit of a kind of nod to the audience. In fact, sometimes I didn't like that, but it's like you saw through what was going on immediately, and you were the funniest thing on that series, because you thought, I know what I think they're doing here. That's what I got the sense, which was you just played that beautifully.
Yeah.
And I wondered how did that all work, that TV series, The Entertainers?
Well, I remember really going for the throat of because what they were after the moment. I mean, Louis Theroux, bless him, but they were after that angle. Everything had an angle, didn't it? And the director, a guy called Nick, in fact, came to see me in Panto last year with his family, and it was great to catch up with him. I sort of thought, right, I'm going to give him as much, I'm going to get back at him. And regarding the tape, the parcel tape, I always had a reel of parcel tape. And I remember we were working the North Pier in Blackpool, and we were on the tram. It was about 400 yards long. We were on the tram going up the pier. And I actually got the tape out, and I taped him, as he was filming me, I taped him to the pole, to the handrail in the tram. So that when we got to the theatre, he couldn't get off the tram. I had to make 2 or 3 portraits. And I was determined to give it to like a game of table tennis, as he had to go at me looking for that sort of angle, that sort of behind the scenes, strip back the veils and find out what's there. I was determined to give him as hard a time as possible. And yet we are still good friends.
See, that's because I think that made the best bit of the series, because it actually had that kind of bit of love that developed in there. And it was also, it's that interesting thing where a TV show is kind of trying to prank people, but they've made a mistake if they try and prank someone who's a prankster. And that's what I think happened, when I'd watch your bits. Yeah,
that's right. You've got to be aware that there's a strong chance that you're going to be used. And we found this, of course, and it became, we were exhausted when we did the Last Laugh in Vegas show a few years ago. And by this time, we're all elderly entertainers. And in terms of a documentary, what they want, Robin, and it's no secret, they want the nuggets, don't they? They want to see the other side. When we went into this luxurious villa in Vegas after a sort of 20-hour flight or travel. And they said, congratulations, welcome, and go and help yourself to a bedroom. And there were 10 of us and only 6 bedrooms. And I remember Jess Conrad passing me on the stairs like a gazelle and found a room with a full-length mirror, as he said. And you then realise, and blessed, dear departed, Bobby Ball, and how we miss him. He sussed it very early, and he just said, be careful, because they are looking. After all, it is a fly on the wall documentary, isn't it? So you've got to realize that everybody, you know, there is an angle there, Robin, isn't there? If you're exposing yourself to the reality, not just a stage performance, which is what the Louis Theroux, that's his direction, isn't it? You've got to be aware that what's in it for them, and they want those moments. But I remember giving Nick, the director, such a hard time. And he actually followed me to my bedroom at the hotel, and I just slammed the door. He thought he was coming in. I just slammed the door in his face. Yeah, it's you have to be aware, I suppose, but that's the way the world's gone. The camera has been turned around now, hasn't it? And we're watching people who used to watch.
Yeah, it's an interesting series, that, because I think that's why it works so well with your bits, was just that sometimes that bit where television is always thriving on something that's just a little bit mean, in the end it just doesn't translate very well. And I thought that was the thing where, let's have a quick look actually at, we're going to jump a clip and then we are going to have the clip from The Voice a little bit later on. But as you've mentioned Last Laugh in Vegas, let's have a quick look at some of Last Laugh in Vegas.
I'm going to top up my tea. Wow, that was a moment. Yeah. It was, I'll tell you what, the thing is, it was quite emotional at the end to get that reaction, to actually finally, after so many years, to have got to Vegas and then to have got a standing ovation. It was quite special, Robin.
Well, it's interesting because I thought you and Mick Miller in particular really shone in that environment. There was something that was very interesting to watch in terms of, you know, all the acts that were on.
It was even more special because the director, Frank Marino, who is a Vegas legend and has been in Vegas 30, 40 years, and is a sort of he identifies. He came over to see us, this group of elderly entertainers who were at the end of their careers, were going to hit Vegas, and he didn't get it. And of all the places that they flew him over, and we assembled in this rehearsal room in Wigan, as you would. You're going to Vegas, why don't we meet in Wigan? And they produced him from behind the curtain, and then we more or less had to audition for him. We all had to do our bit. And when I came out on the Ostrich, he absolutely didn't get it. He looked and said, well, what? And his assistant, and they actually mouthed the word, and I can't do it now. He just looked at it and said, what the? And there was he just didn't understand. And of course, that then raised a few innermost doubts, in as much as I thought, well, hang on a minute, I think I know what I'm doing, but this is a Vegas guy and he doesn't get it. So what will they think in Vegas? And so Frank Marino was expecting a car crash, I'll be honest. He put his name to the show, and as far as he was concerned, there was every chance that it would be an absolute total disaster. And when you're faced with someone who kind of knows his onions and knows his area, knows the venue, you do begin to have doubts. But I think what we all fell back on was our experience over the years Robin, after 30, 40 years working across the world on the ships and Australia and working to Americans. If it's funny, it's funny. What's funny, works. And thankfully, the visual aspects of what I did and hitting them with the old variety, oft with a song, back to my boy singer days, got me that ovation, and I was always I'm very moved by it. Actually, it was very moving. It was a long journey, in every sense of the word. So Vegas was and Mick, of course. You would think Mick as a Scouse comic, but funny. He's a funny man. You can't. I've got to tell you a story about Mick Miller, because he's come up, and I love Mick to death. We were working a club back in the 70s. It was a Circus Tavern at Purfleet, and it was a big cabaret club. And I'd been there all day setting my props up and everything. And Mick walked in at about 4 o'clock with his suit and a little case. And he produced out of his a brand new pair of shoes, stage shoes. They were patent leather, black and grey, fantastic. And he said, "What do you think of these? I just bought these in Oxford Street. Fantastic." And off he went to have a drink. In the boot of my car, I'd got an identical pair of shoes that I'd had for 4 years. And I'd been playing football in them and gardening. And I went to my car, and there was about half a dozen of us in the room. I said, "Watch this." And I swapped, and I put my old gardening shoes in his shoebox, put them back in, and we all assembled and sat around the room while he got ready to go on stage. And his face, when he opened up and looked, and it was absolute sheer disbelief. There was such a sort of a unique and different sort of look. What? Amazing. Can I give you one more Vegas story?
Of course you can.
And it's all to do with the japes and the nonsense. I go back with Tommy, with Cannon and Ball, with Tommy and Bobby. I go back 50 years when I was compere at the Aquarius Club in Chesterfield. And I was booking the acts as well. And they turned up. It was middle of summer. We'd had a quiet area. So we'd heard about this Cannon and Ball act, and we topped the bill. We put a big banner outside saying, "Amazing, here they come this week, Cannon and Ball." When they turned up for band call, they were terrified. They said, "We can't top a bill, we're just a support act." Well, of course, they went on, and they did famously, as we become to know them in subsequent years. But I'll never let them ever forget that week at the Aquarius Club when they came in and absolutely bricked it and went, "No, we can't top the bill." And by the way, they were a pair of welders, and the pianist at the club that did some arrangements for them. This is true, on the premise that they would make him a pair of gates. And they got the music, but he never got his gates. and again, I never let them forget them. But the story I want to tell you about Vegas is this. After the triumph of the show, we were all getting ready to leave and to fly home the following day. And Bobby Ball went into the town to the nearest hypermarket and came back with a big suitcase, because he realized the stuff he'd bought, he wouldn't be able to get his belongings into the one case. So we all packed, and all the suitcases were by the door, probably 30, 40 suitcases. And Bobby said, "The only problem is," he said, "that's a brand new suitcase. How am I going to recognize it when we get to Heathrow?" And I thought about it, and I went to the crew and I said, "Have you got any, you haven't got any tape, have you?" I always keep it by my side here. And there's this orange tape, you see. So they said, "Yeah, we've got some electrical tape here. You can have the real. It's orange." So I went to Bobby's suitcase and I put a big length of that tape around the handle of his suitcase, and I showed him, and he went, "Oh, fantastic!" He said, that means I'll be able to recognize it when it comes off the belt." I then thought, why not? I've got a reel of tape here, and I love my tape. So I did everybody's case. there must have been 30, 40 suitcases, all with a length. When we got to Heathrow, the suitcase, every suitcase on the carousel had orange tape on it. And he very nearly lamped me for that joke. But it was, that's kind of sums it up, doesn't it, Robin? Seizing the moment.
You know what? That's it. Mentioning Bobby Ball, it was something that I was going to ask you, which was, I mean, today is also would have been Rick Mayall's birthday, and you may have seen a fantastic sketch, a Cannon and Ball sketch, where Rick Mayall plays a tourist information guide. And it's the energy between Bobby Ball and Rick Mayall is a really, you know, when two people get together and they're both feeding off each other. And what I found interesting about that is, you know, when I was growing up as a big fan of alternative comedy when I was kind of 12 or 13, and you know, a lot of the what would be considered more mainstream wasn't my thing at that point. You know, it's things that I look at now and I really enjoy. And I wondered what your first reaction was, because I remember doing a musical with Ted Rogers and Brian Burden and Freddie Parrotface Davis, and when I walked in, there was this look of, oh, he's one of the alternatives. You know, it was like this worry that I was somehow going to go into a monologue about Margaret Thatcher, even though she'd been out of office for 7 years. Yeah, there was this imagination of, and I wondered what your reaction was in the early days of when, because you know, some of the comics on the kind of more traditional circuit were quite, you know, energetic in their criticism.
Oh, absolutely. And I was one of the crowd. I think the initial thing was resentment. I mean, there was this phrase that's alternative comedy. It's the alternative to comedy in as much that it's not funny. And all the boxes that they were ticking were alienating us from the new brigade. The way that the new comics dressed, for instance, they didn't have a bow tie and a frilly shirt and a smart evening suit. They turn up in ripped jeans and a T-shirt. And I think as a mass and as a generation, we absolutely resented what was happening. I think in that sense, I was fortunate in it that I was just outside the main thrust with the visuality of what I was doing. Everything I was doing, it was mayhem, and it was visual, and it didn't conform to the norms of the comedian I've just described, leaning on a mic stand with a mic and with a frilly shirt and doing gags about the mainstream gags about the mother-in-law or whatever. So in that respect, I think I was more comfortable than the majority of stand-up. When I say stand-up comics, the phrase hadn't been invented. The stand-up that didn't occur until much later. And so when as you said, when Ben Elton and etc. and this whole sort of crowd, there were dozens, everything on television. Suddenly, we became dated. We became dinosaurs. But I understand that, Robin. I mean, there were people, middle-aged comics, having had 20, 30 years experience with a lifestyle, mortgages, etc., suddenly realized we were no longer flavor of the month. And that's kind of quite hard to take, isn't it? Mm. I remember back in the 70s when I got my biscuit tins and I'd got this big 12-foot rubber shark, more of him later, and the mic stand with the marbles. I remember an old comic coming up to me. I worked with at a corporate thing, and I'll never forget it. He just said to me, "I've learned something tonight," and I think he saw in me what hadn't been the case in years before, with the exception of people like Cooper and Ken Dodd. There was a sort of variety style approach to comedy, which went back 30, 40, 50 years. And I think I was bringing, with my kind of anarchy and props and visual approach, I think I was bringing something different. And of course, I accept Cooper and Doddy and a few more. But in terms of what he was doing, this comic, he saw me as doing something different and another generation. And of course, everything evolves, doesn't it?
It's interesting because I think of that your love of those moments of anarchy. Of course, a lot of the stuff that really thrived from alternative comedy was things like Rick Mayall and Nate Edmondson, which was this incredibly kind of destructive slapstick. It was proper cartoon slapstick, and it's interesting the divide. I think there were a lot of presumptions probably on both sides about what things the divide between, and in fact there was a lot of similarities. A lot of people with Les Dawson and things. It was I think a lot of it was about someone like Les Dawson was creating his own material. And I think a lot of the reaction was what you would call the frilly shirt brigade, who were all doing the same jokes, and it just felt like things had got tired, and it didn't have that level of playfulness. Again, it was going through. Yeah. Well, let's have a look now at it's the year before punk, 1975, before everything changed. 1975 Seaside Special. Let's have a look at that.
Wow.
One.
Ladies and gentlemen, te a moose, or English translation, to a mouse. Wee sleeket coorin timorous beastie, all with a panic's in my breastie. Thou wouldna run awa sae hasty wi' bicker and brattle. I would be loath to run and chase ye with mud and... Look, Bernie, what are you doing on now? I'm right in the middle of my serious poem. It's the first time I've ever done it.
He came about the mouse. And I've had some lessons from Johnny Moore, and I'm going to do the rest of me impressions.
Impressions? What impressions?
For instance, John Wayne.
Look, Bernie, you must understand that John Wayne never wears a hat like that.
What do you think he takes his wages home in? Oh, if you like.
Oh, God.
On the other hand, just after the war, my mother come back from the shops. We had real butter.
Oh, dear.
I did that in Newcastle last month. I didn't know what I was talking about. True.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Now, look, Bernie, please, would you just let me get on with my poem? Thank you very much.
Okay. Next impression, Louis Armstrong.
Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Wee sleeket coorin timorous beastie, all with a panic's in my breastie. Thou wouldna run awa sae hasty with mud and prattle. I would be
Pearly white.
Bernie, what are you doing now?
It's a mistake. She ordered scampi.
Well.
Hey, Bernie. Hey, I'll tell you what, she's looking worried now, but wait till she sees the size of the chips.
Now, come on, behave yourself. Big soft day, but come on. Just because you want to do your Ted Heath impression. Come on, if you don't behave. Heel now. He doesn't know what his heel is. That's true. I'll take you down to that chip shop and I'll put you in that batter. I'm not going in that gutter.
Ben, now please, enough of the fish.
There you go.
See, I love it. It's still one of my favourite things is the old, I am trying to do my serious thing. Because, of course, that's what we did when I joined you for your Edinburgh show was, you would be running behind me with Oswald and I was oblivious. And then kind of, and I love all that bit of just the, again, let me do my serious thing. It's the beautiful bit of comedy pulling the rug.
It's the epitome, really, of variety. The straight man, see, and the fact, going back to people like Sid Field and Norman Wisdom, he always had somebody that he could pull the rug under from. You know what I mean? He could actually reduce them to a babbling wreck from all their sort of superiority and energy, take them from where they were on the pedestal and bring them down to his level. And I mean, working, you saw the fish there, and I was doing a summer season in Jersey, and I actually flew over on the day, which you're not supposed to do when you're in Jersey, leave the island, anything could happen. I got a taxi from Heathrow to Shepperton Film Studios, where they were selling up Shepperton. And I came back with that fish unwrapped on the plane that evening to Jersey. It came through the carousel on the conveyor belts. And it was and stayed with me for a long time. Just doing that, I only had it in my act. It did about 20 seconds. Louis Armstrong, and the gag from the fish was, if you don't behave yourself, I'll take you down the chip shop and put you in that batter. And the fish said, I'm not going in that gutter. And that was it. On Sundays in 1983, all these acts assembled at Blackpool Airport. And there was an agent called Jack Sharp, and he came up with this idea of North comes South. And he got all the acts together at Blackpool and flew them to various other resorts in the UK, to Great Yarmouth, to Bournemouth, and to Torquay, anywhere that there was an airport. They put us in a series of airplanes and we flew. And we turned up this particular Sunday morning at Blackpool, and there was Roger de Courcy, the event, of course, with Nookie the bear. There was my good self with the fish, the ostrich, and the cat. There was the Orville. There was Keith Harris with Orville and Cuddles, and we're all standing around this aeroplane wondering how we're all going to get in. And Stan Boardman had brought his roadie over with him, his roadie from Scarborough, on the premise that there would be a weekend in it in Torquay for his roadie. And the pilots were discussing how they were going to get the props, and they had to take a seat out of the airplane. It was like a 6-8-seater airplane to accommodate the fish. So they unscrewed the seat, took the fish out, took the seat out, put the fish in, turned to Stan and said, your roadie can't come. It was either him or the fish. So we're actually, so we got to Torquay, and Stan said, I'm going to see what you do with that fish that's cost my roadie a weekend. His roadie was in Blackpool for the weekend at a bed and breakfast, looking at the ceiling. And all I did, I came out with the fish and went, if you don't behave, I'll take you that batter. I'm not going in that gutter. And threw it in the orchestra pit. And Stan said to me, is that it? Is that what you do? And I went, yeah. He said, oh, am I going to tell him? He said, and we're all in the aeroplane flying over the Welsh, heading for Torquay, flying over the Welsh mountains. And there's Roger de Courcy, and there's Keith Harris, and there's me. And Boardman said, do you realise if this plane crashed, he said, what with Nookie the bear and Orville and Cuddles and the ostrich and the fish, he said, you'd think we'd landed on a safari park. And they were mad. They were just crazy days. But it brings out the work ethic as well. It's very important to realise that there was so much work, and we turned nothing down. We do everything, Robin. Nothing was out of what we did, thousands of miles a week. It was like kind of get it, working class lads, get it while it's there. And a very informative time of my life. Long summer seasons, long pantos, Australia tours, cruising on the ships, everything. There was work coming out of every doorway, and none of us ever turned anything down. How times have changed.
Now, the annoying thing is we're almost out of time, and there was a lot of things I was going to ask you, including about your agent Richard Armitage, but we'll do that another time.
We must do.
But I've got a lot of questions from people as well. The first one comes from a Rhys Shearsmith has a question for you. Rhys Shearsmith says, he says hello, and he said... He said it was a thrill to meet you when you went along to Buxton to watch the league show. But he wanted to know, Rhys says, what has been the weirdest dressing room you've ever had or digs? And for obviously, I think everyone at home will know that Rhys and Steve Pemberton wrote a wonderful episode of Inside Number 9 called Inside Bernie Clifton's Dressing Room. But he wonders, what is the weirdest one that you've ever had?
Well, the funny thing, I was telling somebody this story the other day, and it involves our good friend Barry Cryer. And we were doing, there was a tiny dressing room by the stage at the Lewisham Theatre. And we were doing a matinee. And there was myself, there was Hope and Keane, Jess Conrad, there's several acts on, but Barry Cryer came in and said, "Can I use your dressing room?" It was about half the size of my kitchen. And Barry said, because I've got a gig, I've got to get the train from Euston, and I've got a gig, I'm doing a speech in Birmingham tonight. And I said, "Yeah, you can have my dressing room." So what we did, we gave him a little sort of square. We marked a square up with tape, because I always had tape, in the corner of the dressing room. And Barry virtually did his thing. And then he closed the first half with his act and headed off to the station to catch a train from Lewisham to Euston. And I never remember looking out this tiny dressing room window to see him hobbling, dragging this suitcase behind him. And he dragged it onto the platform at Lewisham. And then he got to the Euston, and he dragged it on the train, and he got to Birmingham, and he dragged it from the train into a taxi, into his hotel room, and he put the suitcase on the bed, opened it, and inside, as well as his clothes, there was a giant stage weight. He'd taken this, it must have weighed about 20, 30 pounds, like 10, 15 kilos, and he dragged it all the way across the country. So I suppose there is a moral there. And thank you, Reese, for the question. In terms of dressing room, never share a dressing room with my good self. It's prone to, and people wouldn't. And the thing I like about shared dressing rooms, though, I mean, it's an interesting topic. And I realize if we are short of time, if anybody was foolish enough to come and visit me backstage before watching me in pantomime, and I would say, "Why don't you leave your coat? Why don't you leave your coat there?" And they would see regularly through the performance of the pantomime, they would see their clothes come on at various times. I remember Mike Craig, the writer, watching me in Canterbury. And as the second half opened, Idle Jack, which was me, climbed over a wall wearing Mike's trilby, his driving gloves, and a camel hair overcoat. And he couldn't tell anybody. He was dying to say, "Those are my clothes." Otherwise, he would have been evicted from the theatre. So basically, I love the dressing room aspect and the way that the dressing room belongings and situation can bleed onto the stage. That's that little bit of anarchy again, isn't it? That backstage world, bring it on stage and let people guess, why is he wearing he's Idle Jack? Why is he, you know what I mean? That's but it's part of the makeup. Is it in my bones? I suppose it is, Robin.
I can't remember, Bernie, is it you who very often fills people's suitcases or bags with cutlery as well? Or is that someone else who used to constantly, someone would get back and go, "My suitcase is full of spoons"?
I always carry a briefcase. It's like almost like a plastic one. And my favourite story regarding the cutlery is I was on a cruise with several artists, amongst them Christopher Biggins, and we were on the QE2, and it was the last night. It was the captain's farewell dinner, and we were all at this table, and I had this thing. It was about the size of my iPad that I'm watching you with now, and I went to the restaurant manager and said, "Can I borrow a load of cutlery?" So I filled a case full of cutlery and left it, and we had our meal. And as we're leaving the restaurant, we went up to like a mezzanine area which overlooked this, and everybody was done up to the nines, the captain's dinner. And I was leaving with Biggins, Christopher Biggins, and I was holding the briefcase like this, holding it shut. And I just said to Biggins, "Chris," I said, "I forgot my camera. Look after my case with you." So I gave him the case and fled. And as he stood there, the case lid opened and this sort of 30, 40 pieces of best cutlery cascaded onto this marble mezzanine floor. And Biggins looked at it, and the whole restaurant of 1,000 people turned and went, "What?" And he just started to scream. Unexplainable. And so there was always a chance, and that is the best example I can give you of the cutlery. And But there is a victim there again, isn't there, Robin?
But it has a level of yeah, that's true. That is true. I've forgotten. Yeah, looking back, actually, Bernie, your career's been nothing more than cruelty.
It's good, yeah.
This is a question from Tom. Tom says, "Did you have to teach David Walliams how to ride Oswald for the Royal Variety Show?"
Well, that was such a moment. Williams rang and said, "I've got this idea for the Royal Variety Show," and he said, "You will top the bill, ostensibly." He says, and at the beginning of the show, I will announce that the top of the bill, Bernie Clifton has been held up in traffic, and he's on the M4 and he can't, and etc. etc. But meanwhile, here's Robbie Williams, and meanwhile, and here's Barry Gibb, or here's Lady Gaga, and all these stars were prefaced before they appeared by, "I'm sorry, the top of the bill isn't here yet, Bernie Clifton," and so on. And when it came to the walk down, these giants of show business all turned upstage to welcome the next act, the top of the bill, and out I came on the Ostrich. And when I think Gaga and Williams and Barry Gibb, these legends, all turning to offer their, and here he is. And then, of course, Williams followed me, and I had to actually give him a quick tuition. I said, whatever you do, keep moving, David. Don't stand still. An ostrich will not ever stand still. Don't be static. And it was a moment. I remember Robbie Williams giving me the "We Are No." It was a great stuff. And thank you, David Williams, for allowing me the moment. Although it was tinged with a bit of sadness, because subsequent after we met Prince Charles, who actually said, "What actually is it? What is it?" He was wonderful. And Lady Gaga refused to have a photograph taken with me, which is a shame, because I think I would have had some kudos with having my photograph taken with Lady Gaga and an ostrich. So yeah, it was a great idea to Williams. Let's hear it for the boy. Great idea.
I did hear it was Lady Gaga who was the person who put the kibosh on you doing the Joe Biden inauguration as well.
And she writes to me all the time, but I'm sorry, she had a chance.
It's interesting that bit of seeing it, somebody like, of course, The Office has that wonderful moment of pathos where David Brent loses his job, and what you don't realise is he's dressed up for this special with the ostrich, and I mean it's interesting to see how it's still, and obviously I wondered what was the reaction. What did you hear from people when the Inside Number 9 episode went out, which I think is I don't know how you feel about it, but I think it's a very beautiful look at that relationship of double acts and that kind of of trying to fight your way through show business.
I think the pathos is very important. I always remember that when you think back to the Marx Brothers, there was always the moment that they were losers, weren't they? With all of Groucho's bravado, and there was always that thing with Harpo. And there's a young ventriloquist who's got a great future. His name is Max Fulham, and I'm always saying to Max, take it. Go for that extra level. He's got a great gift, and he's got this character that says you can make people laugh. Can you make them cry? And this is what Doddy said with his singing. He says, I know how to make people laugh. He says, but can I go in the other direction? And it's Pagliacci, isn't it? It's the classic time when you can take an audience in one direction, hold them, and then take them completely and introduce the pathos. And I keep saying to this young ventriloquist, find a way of dropping the tempo and changing the mood entirely, and that will take you ahead of and above the pack. And it's something that we should never ever look at Chaplin. I mean, forever. There was they personified pathos, didn't they?
Yeah.
And Buster Keaton, there was so much tragedy about them, wasn't there?
Well, it's that beautiful thing of the moment of tragedy, and then normally at the end the resilience. So it might not be a victory, but it's, you know, there might have been failure, but you're going to keep going, and that's the. Then we've got 2 more questions, and then we will have one final clip. And I'm sorry that we didn't have more time. I mean, this is Kathy would like to know, given your recent success in the field of music and as a singer on The Voice and Last Laugh in Vegas, do you ever wish you'd focused more on the singing?
Yes. Yes. I listen, Kathy. Thank you for that question, because I can sum it up in one phrase. I was a singer who got in with the wrong set. You'll get in with the wrong set. I was a victim, I suppose, of where I was in the world, and we've already mentioned the anarchy and the sense of humour that people after the war in my particular corner of the country, in St Helens, had to get by with, and but singing, Kathy, was never enough. My first job was at the Quart Ballroom singing with the dance band, and I'd had the job 3 months before I was banned from the dance hall, because after my ballads with the band, I went to the back of the dance hall, and as people were pulling girls for the last waltz, I collected the doorman's bike and rode round the dance hall on the doorman's bike with Gordon Spencer chasing me with a curtain rod with a lance. We were jousting in the dance hall. And so in that respect, and then I lost my job, and I was banned from the dance hall. So the singing, the vocal thing was a gift, I suppose. And but it was never quite enough, Kathy. It was there had to be something else. But I would have enjoyed much better health if I hadn't embarked on this crazy crusade of physical comedy. And now, whatever the Ostrich is, he's only got one gear, and that's first gear, maybe reverse. When I look at the physicality of the clip we showed from the good old days, those really were the good old days, Robin. I wouldn't change anything. It's an accident. It's just you get one journey, I suppose, don't you? And it's been very interesting. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but I'm privileged to have had the longevity, I suppose.
I blame your cutlery thievery. If you hadn't started stealing all those knives and forks, you'd have known where you'd have been. Elizabeth has the final question. She'd just like to know, when can they see you live again? When can we see you live again? Are you currently, is it looking like you might be doing panto this year or not?
Yeah, we should have had another panto. I did a couple of great pantos with Anita Dobson and playing Baron Hardo, which was great because physically, I wasn't holding the show. I wasn't running the show. It was for Nick Thomas. It was for Kudos, mega organisation. They did the Palladium and the 30-odd pantos, and so we've lost one. We've lost two. We may. Who knows? Believe it or not, I'm 107. I'm 85 next month, and there has to be a winding down, I suppose. But the great, and I've just used the word privilege. It's been a privilege to being so active, and I don't take anything for granted. But I would hope, and I've said earlier, Robin, that I'm kind of defined by working live. By most of my life, and certainly my career, has been defined by having the opportunity to work live. So I would hope that in between time, but just behind me, you can see a poster. I have got this one-man show on the road, but everything I've done with it the last 18 months has had to be cancelled, postponed, and who knows what the back end of 2021 might bring. I certainly hope that I'll be on the road, and watch my website for detail. I also do a Facebook video every Sunday, but I keep that's at 6 o'clock on Sunday, live with people. So I try and stay current in informing people of my general levels of activity.
So everyone, if you go and have a look at Bernie's Facebook, and thank you very much for joining us, everyone who's out there. There's a couple more Slapstick events through to the early evening, and as I said, you can pick up on any of the ones that you've missed as well over the next 7 days. And after Slapstick's over tonight, I'm going to do a quiz because it's Rick Mayall's birthday. We're doing a Young Ones quiz tonight. Lise Mayer, who of course wrote the Young Ones, and my friend Josie Long, and various guest questioners, including Sarah Pascoe and Ian Rankin and others. So that's at 6:30 tonight. Enjoy the rest of the Slapstick Festival. Bernie, thank you so much. It's as I said, there were so many questions about that we didn't get to the Lulu show, and I know there's some. We're going to get to that next time. We'll have to do this again. I hope you'll be up for that.
So. And I hope you realise that I inflated the diving suit just for you, which you can't see it now. It's just collapsed in my kitchen. So if I just hang on a minute, people that may have tuned in late will be unaware. Can you see it now?
Yeah, it's in shot. It's one of the great traditions, of course, we mentioned before about in the Bristol Theatre, the fact the diving suit will often be inflated for the people of Bristol, but it may well not always be seen. If you've never seen Bernie's incredible, I mean, that's another conversation for us to have, the remarkable inflatables that he has as well. Bernie, thank you very much. We're going to end with, in fact, because you're talking about people talking about your singing and your love of singing, let's end with you on The Voice. Bernie Clifton, have a lovely Sunday, and the rest of you too.